Hi, welcome to the People and Housing Podcast. I'm here with Darren. Darren's a client of ours for a number of years.
Yeah, hi Gareth. Nice to see you in person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's really good. My name's Darren Ibell. I am the Assistant Director of Asset Management and Development here at Broxtowe Borough Council. I'm also the Employment Advisory Board Chair at HMP Granby.
Yeah, I think we've brought you in today to discuss the former offender charter. I know there's something that we've been in discussion with for 18 months or so now. I think when you used to work previously at a different council. So yeah, it's good to see it sort of come to fruition. Do you just want to explain to us what the former offender charter is?
Yeah, so this was something that's I started with a couple of years ago now when I was in previous authority at Bassett Law, which is North Nottinghamshire. And it really started, Gareth, to revolve around the recruitment challenges around that local authorities do have in terms of asset management and development type roles, so things like quantity surveyors, project management, staff, building surveyors, etc. And we really struggled in Bassett Law to recruit those sort of staff, and I think that's an issue that's across the board, especially in local authority organisations, and there are many reasons for that. And as a result, we're seeing a lot of agency staff, temporary staff being brought in, and it costing a fair bit of money. And you guys have always been really supportive of us and helped us along that with that with that resourcing issue. But it isn't really something that's sustainable in its current model. We have got apprentices, and we're very good as local authorities of bringing people in and developing them, and have done here at Broxtowe for a number of years. We brought in around since the levy was introduced in 2017, we brought in sort of 23 apprentices, some of whom are now senior colleagues within the business, so it's been a success. And actually this whole former offender charter all came about as a bit of a fluke, really, when I attended a session at HMP Granby, which is North Nottinghamshire, around how we find affordable and accessible housing for people coming out of prison. And while I was there, I met a couple of people from the employment hub that they have up there, and hence started a discussion and a bit of a 2-year journey around looking at how people within prison can be seen as a resource, a viable resource for local authorities to fill some of those recruitment gaps that I just mentioned at the top end of the conversation, really. So it's been 2 years, as we said, of sort of understanding the prison service, understanding how it works and how bureaucratic it is.
Absolutely.
Makes local authority look like a breeze. And actually over that time, and crucially meeting many of the men that call prison their home at this moment in time, it kind of dawned on me that actually there's some really interesting and qualified people within the walls of the prison. And I think the other thing to remember is a lot of people out in there on another day wouldn't be in there. Circumstances may have happened in a way that have led them there. And yes, there are some people that deserve to be in prison. But some people are there just because of a bad choice, and we've all made them in our time. So the longer that went on, the more I believe that this was a viable opportunity for local authorities to try and access former offenders, and also offenders looking to serve remainders of sentences from open prison on licence, which is the direction we're currently going on down as Broxtowe Borough Council. And so was born the idea of bringing a charter together. And the idea around that was that one local authority in Nottinghamshire doing it is an interesting idea and it's a bit of a novelty. All 9 doing it is a different thing altogether. And a lot of the time with local authorities, we're always accused of not joining up. Obviously, we've got local government reform, which is kind of forcing the agenda, but actually we should, as local authorities within our county, all try and work together on certain aspects, especially of recruitment, to try and make it an easier and better process and more efficient for all of us, really. And so the conversation started across Nottinghamshire around how local authorities in this county approach the whole subject of employing former and current offenders. And I'll be honest with you, Gareth, there wasn't much going on. It wasn't a domain that many had entered into, largely because the perceived risk, of reputational sort of sensitivity, shall we say, and local authorities are quite sensitive to the sort of the way that they're perceived, and just public the way that generally offenders and ex-offenders are sort of portrayed in the media, really. So it had been an area where local authorities had strayed away from and not really looked at. And it's not an easy sell, if I'm honest with you. This is not an easy sell. So there have been many discussions around how we collectively approach matters. I'm really proud of Broxtowe in the way that we've led the way, and we drafted a charter which basically we asked all of the 8 authorities to sign up to, which was to give sustainable employment opportunities to offenders coming out on ROTL, as we call it, release on temporary licence, and also people who have left prison having served their sentence. What I think most authorities have admitted to is that they have consciously discriminated against that group of people, and I've often said, we fly all sorts of flags outside our offices, and we say how inclusive we are, and we've all got an equality and diversity statement and policy, absolutely. But actually for a group of people, and there are a lot of, the UK has the highest number of people currently within prison in the whole of Europe at this moment in time. Really? We've got a large group of people, some of whom deserve to be in prison, and we're not talking about them today, but there are people who are serving sentences, coming out and not finding that they've not got the opportunities to actually re-engage back in society and back into meaningful work, and the benefits of being able to give those opportunities stretch wide and far, really. I mean, we all know about the antisocial behaviour issues councils have to deal with. We've got mental health on the rise as well, and homelessness is obviously something which is quite large on the agenda nationally as well, and that touches on all of those things, really. So the charter was really set out to really stop looking at people at sort of an application point of view as somebody who have been in prison or is on licence, and actually there was a something called Ban the Box. That was a campaign that was run a few years ago. It said, let's move that little box that says tick here if you've got any previous convictions. Of course, at some point we're going to need to know that, but at a point when you put your CV in, we should just look at the person. We just look at their skills and their experience, and they should be there on merit. And that was kind of what we got everyone to sign up to give those opportunities, not just for low grade manual labour. There's nothing wrong with that. And things like bin collection, grounds maintenance, things like that is all very valid. But it was to try and look at those back office roles, those professional roles that we talked about, the QSs, the planners, the building surveyors who were in short supply, and offer those roles as well. So that's how it kind of came to pass. And earlier in the summer, it was agreed, the Former Offenders Charter in Nottinghamshire, and all 9 local authorities signed up to that. And the bit now is the doing bit, which is the tricky bit. Everyone's now signed up to it. We've talked for the last 2 years about it, but it's now about the practicalities of actually going forward and actually realising the objective, which is to bring ex-offenders and offenders on licence into the workplace and make them a part of our teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had the pleasure of recruiting for building surveyors for about 6 years, amongst others, and sometimes it's more of a chore than anything else. Social housing and local government as an industry are naturally quite difficult to recruit into. So the kind of outside of the box thinking around where can we draw our talent, our resources from, whilst also solving a number of problems that councils and the country have, just sounds brilliant. But yeah, you mentioned you're on the Prison Employment Advisory Board for HMP Ramsey.
That's right.
Talk us through what that is.
Okay, so the Employment Advisory Boards was set up a number of years ago by Lord Timpson, as he is now known. Of course, James Timpson set the watch repair and the shoe repair shops up on the high street, and really their objective was to bring together a group of people from outside of the prison environment. So people in business, professionals, a bit like a trustee type of board, if you like, who could come in to the prison and work with prison colleagues. so people from the employment hub, so they call them PELs in prison, which is a prison employment lead. So you would have a lead, a person in that role leading the employment side of things. You would have other leads who are various training for various training parts of the prison, and basically the idea was they would come and sit on the board with a number of people from outside the prison environment, and the sole objective of that board, Gareth, is to create those job opportunities, and those sustainable job opportunities. I underline that word sustainable, because it's all very well providing job opportunities, and go and pick some fruit or go and do this, that and the other, but actually is that a rewarding job? Is that going to be a career for somebody? Is that going to sustain their aspirations when they come out? Well, clearly it's not. And and it's about saying, can we provide those sustainable opportunities where someone can leave prison and start with an organisation and grow in their career as anyone else would aspire to as well. So they were set up, and there was a board in each prison across England and Wales. I'm fortunate enough to be the chair of HMP Ramsey, and round our table we've got people who work for probation. Obviously we've got people from the prison service there. We've got people from private industry, and you would have met a few of those people when we did the open day there. We've obviously had people from recruitment agencies such as yourself who support us as well. We've got other local authorities on our EAB, so we've got Bassett Law that sit on ours, and one of the things we're tasking is the doing bit of the local authorities that have signed up to the charter in Notts, is that we want each local authority to get on a representative on the EAB, and EAB are in the prison around Nottingham. So I know, for example, we've got Ashfield who are quite keen on the idea, and they're looking at putting somebody on one of the boards. We've got Bassett, as I said, who've come on at Ramsey, and there are a number of others. So, and the objective there for me, is to get those colleagues out of their normal comfort zone and into an environment that they're not quite used to, and actually the first sort of 12 months of their involvement will be listening, and it'll be learning, and that'll be the sort of objective to start with, really. So they're a really good forum for understanding more about how prison works, but as I say, the objective is, that at the end of the day, everybody around that table should come there with the sole view of helping to generate those sustainable employment opportunities.
Given that you've been doing it for 2 years now, I imagine you've gone on a sort of a journey yourself.
Yes.
Certainly. What successes have you had?
I think the first thing, Gareth says, first success is that I understand it an awful lot more than I used to. I think my perception of the people who are in prison has changed massively, and I think for me that's quite a big success on its own. Not a material success, but my whole view on the prison service and the people, as I say, that call prison their home is totally changed now, having sat and listened and talked to a number of the men who were in establishments across Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, as I've visited a number of prisons. I think the charter obviously is a main success to be able to sit down in front of a group of senior professionals in local authority sector and explain to them, talk with some level of knowledge to get to a point where all 9 of them have signed up to what I said earlier is quite a tough sell. So I think that is a good start. Obviously in Broxtowe we've got our first employee coming on licence to us. He's going to be beginning with us in January, and we're really excited about that. And for me, that will be a point of that'll be a seminal moment for me personally, but also for this authority, in terms of we've actually turned all the work and all the talking into an actual end outcome, which is what I want. And it's funny, actually, I was asked to attend a session in London last month to talk about the success of what we're done in Nottinghamshire, and I declined that because at the moment, for me, the success is having somebody come here from a prison environment, either on licence or once they've finished their sentence, and actually do the job and be successful. And I think that's the thing. At the end of the day, we can all pat ourselves on the back and say, it's great, we've got people to sign a bit of paper and everything's great, but I would like the end result, and the end result is what we're going to see in January. So I think the real success is still to come, But I'm pleased that people are talking about it. I'm pleased we're doing a podcast on this today. I've had the opportunity to do a few of these now, and I'm really, I think that's great. So we can be talking about it, and we can actually get it out in the open, and more people will become interested. And we've had interest from councils all over the country of what we're doing in Nottinghamshire. People want to join in, and we've had MPs come to the office and sit down. We've talked to local MPs about what we're doing, and everybody, it seems to be really engaged, and we must maintain that momentum now. So I think the fact we're just talking about it today, for me, is a success.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, since I started in this sector and since I've started talking to you about social value and everything else, I think it was a conversation that we had around social value initially that led us into this. I've had conversations with a number of housing associations and councils throughout the country, as my job's nationwide. The moment that you start talking to people, and the moment that you can get them to start listening to you about this as an option, everybody immediately drops their kind of like what I call their unconscious bias, and they're like, actually, that's a brilliant idea. We struggle to find carpenters, we struggle to find painters, we struggle to find surveyors. Why aren't we doing this? So yeah, I agree completely. Talking about it on the podcast today is a massive win. With successes, obviously come challenges. What challenges have you had in getting this off the ground?
I think we've mentioned it previously, and you just mentioned it just there around people's perceptions, people's prejudice around what is pretty much a media-driven narrative. I mean, we saw earlier in the year when we saw pictures on the national news of people being released from prison early, bottles of champagne and sports cars, picking them up and things like that. And I think all the narrative is about painting these people as people that can't contribute to society again. And interestingly, Gareth, one of the things I would say is, having met a number of the men within prison, the common theme with all of them is, when you first meet them, is that they are very, I would say, pretty demotivated and negative about whether you actually want to talk to them or not. They're very much, you won't want me. They've already made their mind up about it. And actually, the moment you start to engage with them and you start to take an interest in what they've got to say, and you've got an interest in their story as well. A lot of the time, my opening gambit is, talk to me about your career, talk to me about your life. I'm not that interested with what you're in for. That's not what, and that's something that they tell you straight away. Don't go in there asking them that. Just to understand them and want to listen to them. And I think once all of a sudden they realise you're interested in who they are and their story and their skills and what they've got to offer, then they start to open up a bit more.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. So I'd say the biggest challenge, to go back to the question, was the perception of people who are in prison or have been in prison. And what I always say to people when we talk about that is, it's a very thin line from the outside world.
Certainly.
So that environment, we're sitting here now in a nice warm office. We're free and able to do what we like, but we could get into a car tonight. We might be on our mobile phone. We might have stopped and had a couple of drinks at the pub, and we have a horrific accident in the M1 and somebody is killed. All of a sudden, you find yourself in a position, you've done wrong, but you effectively find yourself in a position where you could be doing a custodial sentence. You could be out, getting a scuffle, in a club or something like that. Somebody falls and hits their head on the pavement. You're serving a prison sentence at the end of the day. And I think it's easy, and we have to remind people and say that, these people aren't naturally bad people. As we say, there are some people in there I've met who I would never want to meet ever again in my life. That's not the people we're talking about today. We're talking about as low-level offenders who have done things wrong, who have served a sentence, who have been through the process and have come out. And a lot of the time, I do say this, is a lot of the time the person that you meet in prison is not the person who did the crime in the first place. Prison changes people a lot of time. People get a lot of time to sit and think about the choices they've made. And you heard Martin Johnson, who was out of Ramby. Mm-hmm. And Martin articulates it perfectly. He's a guy who was in there, but you wouldn't think it unless he told you that. So I think the challenges around perception, stigma, the risk, especially in local authorities, we say, and you mentioned before we started recording about, sort of going into people's homes, and I think that's that's a really valid question, to be honest with you, and it's one that is dependent on the sort of crime that is committed, and there'll be certain crimes, for example, we will not consider because of our interaction with the public. And there are some vulnerable people out there as well that we have to provide services for. But we've got a full list of risk assessments which map all that out. And that's the way we do it. So I think there are challenges around that. But as I say, we do a lot of talking about it, and the time is now to start the doing bit and trying to realise that actually this is a really good opportunity for not only local authorities but also the men themselves to come out and actually rejoin society. And I think proof of concept is important, which is why I wanted to get to a point where we'd actually done it all the way through. And once you can do that and say we can demonstrate it and it works, then I'll be a lot happier.
So the demonstrating that it works is key. 100%. And it's going to be an exciting couple of months to see. Hopefully, as I'm sure it will, everything will fall into place, and we'll have a sort of a strong evidence base to go out and go, listen, this works.
I think it's really important, Gareth, and we've done a lot of work. So we're now in the unknown. So Cabinet signed off our recruitment of a chap who's coming to us from HMP Sudbury in Derbyshire on licence in January. And once they approve that's where the hard work begins now, because we've got an induction programme sort out. We've got to sort out the employment contract with the prison, so it's not going to be with the individual themselves. He will be a serving prisoner. He will be on licence. And that's really a key thing. That's a key thing that no local authority in this county has done, taking an offender on whilst they're on licence. So I think that's really important to set out. But we've put together what is a substantial induction package. Because it's not only them coming in and learning the job, but it's also learning to be in this environment again. You can imagine, they've been out of an environment like this for a certain amount of time. They've got to reintegrate again and just dealing with colleagues. And another challenge, which is going back to challenges, is making sure that colleagues here, people who are working in the office, they feel comfortable as well. And again, they'll have their own perceptions, their own prejudices, which are driven by what we talked about earlier. So again, it's making sure that they're ready for this as well. So it's about us sitting down with colleagues, being open with colleagues and saying this is what we're meant to be doing. Because ultimately, if he comes in on day one with a big "I am an offender" splattered on his forehead, it's not going to work.
You don't want to set him up for failure, don't you?
We don't. We don't. So there's a lot of balancing, and there's a lot of talking, and there's a lot of sort of trying to get people's views, take them into account, and allay those fears. And so it's complicated, but I've no doubt that it'll be a success.
Yeah, neither have I. I mean, when I went to the event at HMP Ranby, hearing about ROT's release on temporary licences, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
It's again, sort of my unbiased prejudice, everything you hear in the media about prisoners and about the prison system and how overcrowded it is and X, Y, and Z. Actually, to hear that, there's prisoners that are getting up, getting a shower, getting themselves ready for work, leaving prison, going and doing a full 9 to 5, and then going back to prison. Obviously, well, actually, that's no different to what you or I do. The only difference is we have got our own cars to take ourselves to work. And when we go home, we can leave again. But actually, it's a great way to reintroduce somebody to society. And why not? What's the actual problem with it? But the media narrative straight away isn't helpful.
It isn't. I mean, I saw something in the media the other week that referred them to people in prison as lags. Now that's a term that I remember them being used in the 80s. I go back that far, and you think to yourself, well, really, that's not particularly helpful.
No.
I think the other thing to say around it is that there is a lack of understanding around the prison service, because most of us, have not been in prison and not been in that environment, and not, so we don't understand it anyway, and that in itself causes a lot of problems, because I like to call it voyeurism. So people come along, they take the opportunity to come to an event that we run at Ranby, or an event that in another prison in the East Midlands, and people go along because it's interesting, because it's crikey, it's a bit new, it's a bit dangerous. I'll go in and see what it's about, and it becomes more about something to tell people at a dinner party or to their family when they get home, but than actually going along with any intention of actually wanting to actually deliver those sustainable job opportunities. And I think that's another challenge as well. But it's about taking the time to understand the prison service and say all its foibles and all its and more than anything else, understand the men that are there and take the time out. And I've really enjoyed the time sitting on round tables, talking to groups of men about their aspirations, their experiences, in terms of employment, and what they want to get out of life when they come out of prison. And it's quite an inspiring conversations. I've taken people from Broxtowe along, and we've sat in rooms, and people's perceptions changed completely overnight in terms of what they thought when they walked in to what they thought when they walked out. So
one of the lines that really stuck with me from Ramby, one of the speakers said, is the prison's there to confine you, but it's not there to define you.
I like that, because that was mine. Yeah.
Was it?
It was mine. Yeah. Thanks for that.
No, it was a brilliant. And I was with obviously Dal, and you walked away and I went, that's actually true. It's there to serve a purpose in society, obviously, but it doesn't define you. 6 years out of your life, potentially. It doesn't define who you are as a person at all.
I think when you're younger, there was a younger version of Gareth Morgan, as there was a younger version of Darren Ibell, and that version is not this version today.
Exactly.
We've grown, we've learned, we've made mistakes. We've been fortunate that maybe we were born into a circumstance where we had a relatively happy and solid childhood. A lot of these people haven't, and have not made the right decisions as a result, and as a result of some pretty poor choices, have ended up in prison. And somebody said to me once, they said, I've not had a first chance, let alone a second chance. And I think that's something that stuck with me. So it's right. There's lots of reasons why people are in there, and like I said, it doesn't make them a bad person if they've made an error which has seen them serve a custodial sentence.
What kind of positions do you see this scheme assisting councils and housing associations to employ?
So, as we said at the start, Gareth, we are looking at, or I've certainly in this council, looking at the more skilled jobs, if not the back office jobs, the career graded work. As I say, there's absolutely nothing wrong with a lot of the roles that are currently going out to prisons through the commercial sector. So hospitality is a big one. Obviously, Timsons themselves, very much pride themselves on offering sort of retail roles to offenders on Rotland, ex-offenders, or former offenders, should I say? And there's nothing wrong with any of that at all. The roles we are looking for are those skilled roles that we just can't get at this moment in time. So we say quantity surveyors, planners, not in my team, but certainly I know we've got a lack of them. Building control officers as well, not part of my team, but again, really difficult to get hold of. And then your building surveyors. One of the things that's caused this, you'll be able to talk to me more about this than I would to you, but the disrepair agenda seems to have had a real effect on a lot more people coming away from permanent building surveying roles and taking quite substantial agency contracts with councils and housing associations who are struggling with the whole tidal wave of disrepair and the ambulance chasing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we did a podcast a couple of months ago, which will be by the time that this is released, will be out there. And the disrepair, and that was all around the disrepair issue. And I mean, you're right. Yeah, this chap had a heat map printed out of which estates being targeted and by which solicitors. Yeah. And one of my clients, I always remember this. This was around the start of my career. I was recruiting for a disrepair surveyor, an interim disrepair surveyor, funnily enough, because they couldn't find somebody on a permanent basis. The client called me up. He was down in Essex, and he just went, Gareth, I really need, have you got anyone for me? People are quite difficult to find. Why? What's changed? I spoke to you last week, and he was like, okay, fine, we'll take a week to review CVs. And he went, well, I've just, on my drive into work this morning, I've just driven past a billboard. Normally on that billboard is an arrow and a golden arches M next to it saying McDonald's 350 metres this way. But this time it's changed. It's from a solicitor's, and it goes, do you live in a housing association property? Looked at the billboard and I thought, I work for that housing association. Somebody is actually openly advertising that they're targeting us for disrepair. And yeah, it's a massive issue. That's a massive issue, and as a result, the knock-on for that is recruiting surveyors in for it is pretty difficult at the best of times. Which again, something like this would be perfect for.
Now, people might say, well, you won't get those sort of people in in prison. And I would have thought that before I started this little journey. But actually, I've met an awful lot of very skilled people. So you mentioned a lot of trades there. And again, there's a lot of people with good trades backgrounds that are in there. I've met a number of good QSs. One who we nearly recruited, he's from Walsall, and in the end, he got a job with another organisation a little bit more closer to home for him. I've met people who have run multiple retail sites across the UK. I've met people who have run massive construction sites, multi-million-pound retail developments, and housing, house building sites. So there are people there, and they are skilled. I think it's just there are some people as well with not very many skills. I would say the people that never had the first chance, but have got the attitude, they've got the hunger to want to come out and actually give their life a go. And they've been, in many ways, they've had that epiphany in prison. Said, well, I don't want to be that person that I was there. I want to be somebody else. And actually giving somebody a break like that, not only do you deal potentially with a recruitment issue, but there's also the retention issue as well, where you say that person will give you loyalty. You've given them an opportunity, and they'll look to come into your organisation. They'll work harder than anyone else works. They'll do whatever is necessary to actually get themselves back into a position where they can actually have a life outside of prison again, and support their families and be seen not as a guy who was a criminal, but a guy who actually plays a really good role in society again. And I think that's really, really important. So it's the attraction and the retention side of things. So I would say to anybody who thinks that that there aren't those people in prison, I would say probably need to have another look, and you need to spend a little bit more time. And I think that would be my message today to anybody watching the podcast. Say, take some time to understand the sector and to understand how it works, and spend some time listening, and you realise that it's totally different to what you first thought it was.
I mean, absolutely. Yeah, even the very few hours of exposure that I've had to it has completely changed my opinion of it. And I suppose from a recruitment standpoint as well, you're not just getting somebody a job, you're getting them a life. Absolutely, it's 100%. You're giving them a lifeline that's quite rare if you're leaving prison.
I think you mentioned social value a little bit earlier, Gareth, and one of the things that actually we as a sector need to be better at is measurable social value. So I think that the whole social value agenda has come a long way in a few years. It used to be the fag end of an agenda, a pre-start agenda. It's now takes up, for example, here we weight at 20% of our, our tender returns. It's worth 20% of the overall weighting, which is quite significant. But one of the things that we need to do better as a sector is have, social value input that is we can actually measure the impact. So, whilst going and painting a community centre or doing a litter pick is really quite nice, that's not the impact we want. We want deeper, sort of more meaningful impact for our communities and our borough here at Broxtowe. And one of the pillars around our social value policy that we have is around employment opportunities for groups of people who have been marginalised, who cannot access the employment market as easily as others. So we think about the ex-military, and Broxtowe play a big part in that now. We have people that we call NEETs, so not in employment or any form of training. So there's a lot of young people who just can't seem to get into the job market. There are also former and serving offenders, so they form. This forms part of a wider group of people. And actually, if you can start to get into those groups of people and bring them into the workforce, not only are you giving them a life and you are enhancing their life, but from socio-economic point of view, the value of that is huge in terms of sort of the how the economy benefits the local economy, and how that then sort of assists people on the high street and things like that. So there's a whole wide range of issues, and we talked about antisocial behaviour, we talked a bit about homelessness. One of the things to say about Rottle is where in terms of homelessness is when people go out to work, most of their salary is either put away towards the deposit for rent when they come out, or it's given to the fund for victims of crime. So not a great deal of money that they earn while they're on licence actually goes to them that they can actually use.
Yeah.
But it means that when they come out after their period on licence and they've been successful, whatever, they've got enough money accrued so they can put a deposit down for a flat rental, for example.
Yeah.
So they're not on the streets there or sofa surfing or whatever else.
So you solve the risk of reoffending. You reduce the impact on the homelessness team, and you're probably also solving a fair bit of antisocial behaviour.
And you benefit in the economy as well.
Absolutely, because they had stats, didn't they, when it ran me around the cost of reoffending, and it's astronomical.
It's huge.
Really.
£18 billion, the economy.
A year, yeah.
On
reoffending. And this will go a long way, provided it's rolled out nationwide.
The more you understand, Gareth, and the more you talk about it, which is why I'm so pleased to be doing the podcast today, you start to realise that actually this is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Why
it's a win-win situation.
Did we not think about this many, many moons ago? And I don't know the answer to that question, but the more it's just about trying to understand the subject matter and realise these are a group of people that are, a lot of whom can come back in society and play a really good part.
And the housing situation as well. It's interesting you mentioned that, because that's something I didn't realise was, but when they spoke about it at Randy, and we won't go into it in too much detail because the issue on finding accommodation for former offenders is, from my understanding, quite a big one. Yeah, if you've got somebody who's working for 18 months and part of their salary is being saved up for them, so when they leave prison, not only can they leave prison into a stable job, which will provide them a stable source of income, they also leave prison with the deposit for a flat. So they've got their accommodation, they've got a job. The risk of reoffending must just be non-existent, really.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got the whole burden on the welfare bill, and obviously we've just had the budget, and that's been a big topic in terms of the welfare bill. But one thing that people may not realise is that people who are coming out of prison, they can't actually start their universal credit claim whilst they're in prison. So they can't put an application in, and then when they come out, the benefits are there for them. And I know why that is the case, because they want to discourage people from going onto the benefits system and claiming, which I do understand. But if people are coming out of prison with no money saved up, no likelihood of any form of employment or income, they then have to start their application at that point. They've then got a period of time where they have got no resources whatsoever. So the likelihood of them finding their way back into a sort of avenue where they, potentially where they've just come from, that got them into prison in the first place, is quite high, because they need money. They need money to be able to live. So how are they going to deal with that? Well, they're going to go and do maybe something that will put them back in prison, and that's where the whole doom loop comes from, really, about reoffending.
Well, I mean, if you drop me into 5 years' time, no job, no money, no accommodation, and drop me into that scenario, I wouldn't know what to do.
No.
So if I knew other avenues of making money, perhaps I might take those instead. So it's just a no-brainer. I mean, I suppose the final thing really is, I imagine there's going to be a number of people that are going to watch this and listen to this and think, that's brilliant, like, that's something that we need to be doing. For me, working in this sector, I almost feel like us as recruitment agencies who provide to social housing organisations, but also social housing organisations and local government, you've almost got kind of a mandate to explore this avenue. It should be a calling. We all look after vulnerable people. It's the name of the game. Social housing, you're looking after people who can't afford to buy their own property or can't afford to rent their own property, so they're in a social landlord. Councils, you've got a duty care to the public. That duty care should extend to prisoners as well. What advice would you have to housing associations and councils and anybody else who's watching this now? What advice would you give to them, to start this process, to begin the journey?
It's funny, because that question is asked a lot of me, really, as I start to talk to people who haven't been in this sort of in the room talking about this sort of thing before. My first bit of advice would be to seek out your local prison local to you, and join the Employment Advisory Board, and spend the first 12 months of it sitting and listening and learning, getting the opportunity to meet some of the people that work in prison, especially around the employment hubs that they have, and the PELs, that sort of their core job is to get people out of prison and into work. That's what they're measured on. My advice would be go and spend some time doing that before you do anything else. So I had so many authorities ringing me up and saying, we want to do it tomorrow, let's crack on and bring people in. It doesn't work like that, it really doesn't. And this has been, like I said, a 2-year sort of journey for me, and we're just at a point now where we're actually making it a reality. So it's really, really important that you understand, the environment and the people that are in that environment and why they're there, and then start to build things like your risk assessments and thoughts around how you deal with things like data protection. That's another interesting one, how you're going to bring somebody in and make sure that they're not, straight away on that, as you said, set up to fail, by making sure you protect them as individuals when they come in. Your risk assessments, as we say, are really, really important to get them absolutely right, and make those connections with the probationary service as well, because they'll be there to support in terms of if a placement happens. And we've done a lot of work with them around this building and this local area. It all has to be risk assessed. So I think the core message would be, please, you need to go on a learning mission. It is somewhere where you've, an environment which most of us have never encountered in our lives. And I think it's about listening to the stories. It's about understanding why people are in there, and it's about understanding as well how they can come out and really benefit your workforce, and your overall deliverable targets at the end of the day. So that would be my one lingering piece of advice. And then you might get to a point, in a couple of years, where you think to yourself, I'm now understand enough about this to actually make an educated decision to move forward and present to senior, either cabinet or senior management colleagues in a manner where you can actually give them that level of reassurance that you kind of know what you're talking about, which is kind of where I'm at now. So that would be the long answer to that question, I would say.
Perfect. Brilliant. Well, listen, it's been great. So thanks very much, and I'm sure we'll be in touch in the future to see how everything goes.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity, Gareth, to talk today. It's lovely to see you. And obviously, if anybody's got any questions from the podcast or anything, I'd be more than happy to sort of answer them if they would like to reach out.
Brilliant. Well, yeah, I'm sure people will take you up on it. Yeah. So thanks very much for your time.
That's all right. Pleasure.
Brilliant.